your name right. It's Petri, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Excellent. All right. Well, I was just checking with Petri that I was saying his name right, which I am, and that's fantastic news. So, welcome everybody to the Squirrel Squadron live stream for this week. This week we're talking about why your meetings suck. And the why is the very important part there because my guest today actually has real data that can tell us exactly why that's happening to you. Because all of us, I think, would say that our meetings suck. I don't know any client of mine and anyone that I work with who would say they have amazing meetings. So let's see what we can work out to make your meetings better based on actual data. That's the job today. I just want to mention very briefly what is the Squirrel Squadron. I'm Squirrel, by the way, if you can't see that on the screen. And it's my community, which is totally free, of tech and non-tech people working together. I don't know any other community in the world that combines people across genres, across roles, across executive functions. And it exists so leaders in every area can figure out how we can use tech effectively, how can we talk to tech people, how can we have better meetings. So we have events like this every week. Next week, we're doing one on how to get your tech and your sales to collaborate. Far too often, sales is selling stuff that tech can't deliver, and they hate each other and they battle in meetings. So we're going to talk about how to make that collaboration work. That was something the community requested. So I'm going to have some thoughts on that and some discussion in a Zoom call about that topic. And we also have a forum where people discuss all kinds of interesting ideas. I was just having a look. We have one on governance and sort of how you run a meeting. So very relevant to this. It was part of the poll for this meeting. And that's from a squadron member in China, of all places. So we really hit the world here. We have thousands of people in the squadron, which is really great. And we welcome people from all around the world. I have to find it. Petri, where are you?
I'm originally from Finland.
I thought so. Yeah. Are you in Finland now or are you somewhere else?
No, I'm here based in London, or
You're
just
in
the
London. Okay, fantastic. So we're
outskirts of
both in
London.
England, but we managed to talk to people from all around the world. I think the person from China might actually be with us, although it's pretty late there. So I don't know whether he'll still be up, but he'll be watching the recording, I'm sure, because he was very interested in this topic. But we have folks in Australia, in Africa, in Dubai, you name it, we have people around the world. And then the other really interesting discussion I wanted to mention is one about software for breaking habits, which I just found fascinating. And I haven't quite absorbed the idea that the person proposing that has, but we're going to discuss that, figure out whether software can actually help you improve your culture. And that's a very nice segue into what I'm going to talk about with Petri, because Petri, you have, if I understand it right, some software and some tools and some methods you use in your company that help you understand meetings, which sounds like a fascinating idea. And I really want you to tell us all about that. First, can you just give us an introduction to Petri? So who are you? Where do you come from? What sorts of things do you do all day? Tell us just a little bit about you and what motivates you to think about meetings.
Yeah, so originally, indeed, from Finland, as was covered just a while ago. I've been working in a software since late 90s and quite international career, being in Switzerland, in French-speaking, German-speaking part, spent a little bit time in Hong Kong, landed here in London. Always kind of gravitated towards more communication roles in technology. And past 10 years then leading startups, primarily as a CTO, COO, some combination of with the CPO as well. And kind of those leadership team meetings, they kind of got a little bit cryptic sometimes when you discuss about your organizational behavior and what you should do to improve the communication across the teams, including sales and tech teams. Mm-hmm. And highly subjective topics, and understanding your organization was there were kind of not tools for it, and that's kind of then 2020 figure out there got to be a better way when my previous gig came to an end.
And there were some things happening in 2020 that were causing some of us to think about our meetings just a little bit differently, right?
Yeah. It was literally 2 weeks before I founded my business or decided I'm going to build a business. And then came the pandemic. So, yeah.
Ooh, so we're all at home suddenly having our meetings on screens like this, which really changed the dynamic. You got to tell us more about that. But what's the company called? What does it do? Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, so we are called FlowTrace, and we analyze basically your different kind of SaaS tools, understanding what actions people take across these, and of course, collaboration in generic terms is a wide topic. But yeah, like we have found quite a bit of success exactly understanding the meeting culture and how the information is being shared between the teams within the context of meetings. Focus time is the other side of the coin. So you want to create more focus time. Meetings are the way how you organize it. And they kind of like, if you have a lot of meetings, you don't have focus time. But if you have only focus time, you're doing wrong things, basically. So yeah, Flowtrace, indeed, we are analyzing basically people's calendars and the way how information is being shared. And we also bring in details about video calls. We do have a kind of analytics platform for leadership and managerial use, but even more so, we have employee app and different employee apps actually for your Outlook, Google Calendar, Slack, to give your employees a way to understand how they work and then hopefully change the way how they work.
Oh, fascinating. We definitely have to talk about that because I'm always coaching people. I've coached around 300 different organizations around the world in my time, and I'm constantly helping people clear their calendars, figure out their calendars. We definitely got to get into that. I want to make a point to the people watching, by the way. This is interactive. Now, I know you can't speak up and be on the screen here, but I would love to see your comments. Petri would love to answer your questions. This always goes better when people throw in comments and questions and disagreement. So if you hear Petri say, you know, you should have your meetings always, all your meetings on Thursdays, and you think Friday is a better day, jump in and say so. I doubt Petri's going to say that, but whatever provocative thing we say, when you disagree with it, when you have a question about it, when you think something about it, please put that in the chat. It would really be helpful if any of you who would like to would tell us what brought you here, what makes you interested, because then we can customize this to what's important to you. That's very important to me in the squadron, that this meeting be useful to you, that you say, oh, I learned a new technique. I found out something that I can do. I discovered something I disagree with someone about, and I had a productive conversation, any of that. So please jump in with comments. Don't feel you need to wait. We'll try to prompt you for it, but these always go much better when we get lots of comments and discussion. If people are feeling like they'd like to do that today. Right. So Petri, tell me more, because I don't quite understand how the software works. Is it that you're looking at my calendar, you kind of hook into it, you look at my Google Calendar or my Outlook or whatever it is, and in there you see that I have a Zoom meeting, then are you able to then monitor the Zoom meeting, or how do you figure out how the different pieces fit together?
So technically speaking, yes, that's exactly how I could do it. But we are working in a GDPR world, so no,
yes,
I don't go and
I
don't go and snoop into your meetings or
yes.
personal information. But yes, when you look at the corporate calendars, there is obviously a lot of metadata that can be extracted, and which doesn't contain
who came to the meeting, who declined the meeting. I guess you can see that kind of thing. And
yeah,
is it only calendar information then that you have, or do you have anything that tells you sort of how the meeting went, or whether it was valuable? So how do you measure that?
So yeah, like we build a overall picture on the meetings, on the metadata, and actually understand when individual people joined the call, when they left, again, not what happened in the call, but kind of knowing for example, functionality. And then within my platform, for example, some of my clients have turned on something called rules to trigger a feedback from a meeting. Let's say if the meeting is over X number of people and costs over this much, then these meetings are required to prompt a feedback request for the organizer to improve. This is one way, which then takes more like qualitative approach to the meetings.
Nice. And is that your product, or is that part of Outlook or something? Where's that feedback come from?
That's completely us.
That's you. Oh, fantastic. So when I get Flowtrace, I get you and your knowledge. I get the software that lets me keep track of all the different meetings, and I get rules like the one you described that let me say, hang on, if this one's costly, you got to tell me whether it was any good, and if it sucked, we got to figure out how to improve it.
Yeah, that's the advanced use case. Let's say this way. Quite frankly, we are. I believe the kind of quotes unquote industry is in an early stage of understanding that meetings are extremely costly,
which is absurd because we've known this since my father's day. He would tell me about the useless meetings he had, and I said, "Why don't you do something about that?" He said, "Yeah, try working in a giant organization." which is exactly the kind of problem we still have today. We don't seem to have sorted it out. So it may be early days, but it's not new. This isn't a new kind of problem. So what, now you see this across all the different companies. So you have this tremendously very valuable data set. Can you tell us a little bit, what are the common themes that you see? I imagine people say, I have too many meetings. That's pretty common. But do they say why? Do they say what makes a meeting successful? What makes it unsuccessful? What kinds of data do you see?
I do see clients who have too many meetings, but I think too many meetings is just a general term of saying too many useless meetings.
Yes.
This is my gut feel. Quite frankly, when you're sitting in a meeting, you're multitasking, you're just drifting off. Why would you be in a meeting? It doesn't support the meeting's outcomes. It doesn't support the good way of spending your time. It kind of just makes you look busy, I guess. But too many meetings is just a generic term to describe there is issues in meeting
We
culture.
need to understand
This
better
is
what makes
my
them
personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what common themes then do you see when you're looking at that feedback, when you're hearing from users, when you see who comes on late and leaves early? What is feeding that? What's making that an unsuccessful meeting culture?
My number one kind of thing I keep on banging immediately when new clients come on board is the lack of agenda. That's a great proxy of understanding that people haven't figured out what's the purpose why I'm having this meeting. Okay, agenda. If you don't have a purpose of a meeting, you cannot write an agenda. Even if you have a purpose, but if you don't share it with the people just come, they are not prepared to actually have those conversations, what you try to actually achieve with your meeting. And super simple metrics. How many percentages of your meetings do have an agenda is a quite generic way of assessing, okay, where do we get started?
Got it. So I've certainly been in useless meetings that did have an agenda. So we'll come back to that in a second. There are examples where people do really radical things for this. So if people listening don't know, I imagine Petri does, Amazon forces everybody to spend, I think, the first 10 minutes or something reading a 6-page document. So you're not allowed to talk in the first few minutes of your meeting. You have to sit down and read not only an agenda, but an argument and sort of a position, a context for the meeting. So that seems a little bit extreme. Petri, do you see people being successful with that kind of cultural demand, with that kind of rigorous structure? Do you see them being successful if the agenda is of any kind? Does it just matter whether you have one? What makes the difference?
I might be a little bit biased. I don't have a clients like that, like Amazon, who exactly makes people to read for 10 minutes at the start of the meeting. We all know, obviously, that's an extreme example and goes with the folklore.
Jeff Bezos is a little bit nuts, so I'm not suggesting that maybe you or I would say that's the perfect way to do things. But should we be headed that direction? Should we have really rigorous meeting requirements saying you must have an agenda, it must be this long, you must account for all the people? Do you find that it's better to be loose, but you need to have an agenda? What seems to work best?
I have been called as a meeting police or sometimes even the meeting Nazi. I come usually in the new organization. I kind of just, the first thing I want to change is always meeting culture. I see people quite often coming late, coming unprepared. I take my time to get my kind of authority over there. First week, I just see and observe how people are meeting. Usually on the second week, I start conducting my own meetings. I come 1 minute in advance and say, you're late if you're 1 second late. And then the third week, I'm saying, no coming to my meeting unless you're on time. Usually has a tremendous impact and quickly across the organization when people learn that there is suddenly somebody who keeps track on the time and purpose of the meetings. But that's me. So I'm extremely biased here when I say, should the meetings have a rigid agenda? Yeah, I completely think so. And
do you prescribe a format for that? And do you say we should, cover every 5 minutes of the meeting and run a timer? Do you say, look, we should have the top 3 bullet points? What should be in the agenda to make it effective?
When I have clarified indeed my purpose of the meeting, I try to figure out who are the right people to be in my meeting. And, I draft the agenda. Is it a decision-making meeting? Is it a information-sharing meeting? it obviously depends about what type of meeting I'm conducting. Sometimes brainstorming meeting, hey, great session, we run out of time, we need to continue. It's okay as well. But yeah, generally speaking, we are done with the point. Next point. Okay, we are done with the points. We have still 10 minutes left. Let's leave.
Got it. And so then you get more time back if you can make the meeting shorter. You don't want the meeting to run over. You do want it to finish early. That makes sense. And do you find that people sort of extend that or go outside the agenda? Hang on, no, Petri, we need to keep going on this. I want to argue with George some more, and we're in some kind of useless debate. What do you do about that? How do you keep them to time?
Oh, me personally, I just say, guys, great topic, but not part of the meeting agenda. Please have it outside of this meeting.
Interesting. And if you are strongly facilitating like that, if you are driving the meeting and have authority, then you can make that happen. There are certainly cases where people are not so receptive, right? Where they say, you be quiet, Petri, let me go argue about this some more. That is quite difficult to manage, I find.
Absolutely. I kind of think about it, kind of points out there are topics. So kind of giving the authority about a topic for somebody, like, okay, me and yourself, we are not necessarily the right people to talk about because we just have the gravity probably to take it over and actually kind of go and just polish it out.
You're the meeting police. You have probably the star badge to prove you're the sheriff.
In some contexts, but I'm also attendee in many meetings where I don't have it. But then I go with whoever is the organizer who wants to conduct the meeting. It's giving a respect also. I'm sometimes just an attendee where my input is sought for, and I try to do it the best of my capabilities.
Fascinating. Okay. I'll just make one logistical note. Laura is listening in to us and making sure things are running. If Laura or Petri hear extra noise, just tell me there is some noise around me. So, okay, good. Petri's not hearing it.
All good.
I always worry that these thin walls in my 600-year-old house will not keep the sound out. So, Petri, when you look at these meetings, do you see any correlation between length and effectiveness? Do you see any correlation between number of people and effectiveness? Is there any easy metric we can look at besides the presence of an agenda? That's really useful. Anything else we could look at to say, the meeting at 3:00 ain't going to go so well?
The time of the day for meetings, I have genuinely no opinion on that one. It really goes about the topic. I don't want to take a stance on that one. There are a lot of companies who have meeting-free Fridays, but that
I want to come back to that one because I think that's interesting. But I'm interested in your data, Petri, and what you're seeing across the different companies. Have you found any correlations there? Or, it doesn't matter how long it is. It doesn't matter who's there. It just matters that you have an agenda. That'll make it successful. What are you finding from the data?
Most of the meetings are actually closer to half an hour than an hour.
Hurrah.
Yes. And then comes the, because I go a little bit philosophical now. What is the definition of a meeting? And this is something that we have spent a lot of time to actually think about. Is it a meeting if you have a 4-hour booking with your team and you go, for lunch and then you meet and unofficially do something? Is a meeting somebody that two people just meet, completely without calendars? They just meet and share information. What is a meeting? Yeah. And then kind of like me giving my own opinion about other people's meetings. It just, I try to stay away from giving that kind of qualitative side of the aspect of the meeting. I leave it to meeting culture of the company because what we see, the way how the work is being conducted is super different across the different businesses and industries. So I'm not qualified to give that mark, to be honest.
But what I was curious about was if you see any patterns in your data. So you're getting lots of information about people's effectiveness. So if it's a costly enough meeting, they're rating the meeting. You're seeing how many people turn up. You're giving feedback. I think you have a dashboard, and I can go look there and see who's having effective meetings and who isn't. That seems really valuable. Have you caught any patterns? Maybe there aren't any patterns in the data. It varies so much by industry or company that you can't see them. But I'm just curious if there are any that you picked up other than agenda. So we know agenda is definitely a big one.
Agenda goes hand in hand with the organizer. It's surprisingly tied into organizer. Somebody's meetings are better than other people, but again, this would be unfair to say that it's because their length is different. It's actually just how
So a
experienced
long
meeting
meeting with
organizer you
a
are.
really good organizer might be better than a short meeting with a poor organizer, especially if the longer meeting has an agenda and is, you're running through and making sure you're getting value. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, and even more so, one of the features in my platform is kind of look at the people who have the most of the meetings being organized from your calendars and actually go and educate them and get your meeting culture instilled within these people, because then the rest of the organization most likely attend their meetings, and your kind of transformation process gets a lot more easier when you can focus on a handful of people, getting it aligned and having the meetings the same way across those people first.
And I really like that insight, because particularly what happens, at least in my clients, is that the people who call the meetings are not necessarily the leaders. They don't necessarily have fancy titles that start with C. They may be the agile coach. They may be the consultant. They may be someone who's ranging around the organization and organizing a project. And they may not have the access to leadership training and so on. But boy, they could sure use spending a little while with Petri to learn what a good meeting culture looks like. And you can see the valuable data. You can see across the organization, that squirrel guy, man, he's holding a lot of meetings. Nobody's ever trained him in how to do that. We should go see him. I really like that you can get that kind of information.
We usually see kind of like there comes always a big shock, somebody from the organization, and this is usually the one who organizes the company all hands meetings.
Yes.
Because just the number of hours being spent on those is, you just bounce on the list and people would have never guessed.
That's going to definitely go right up to the top. And you definitely want that one well facilitated and well organized. I've been in a lot that are not. So you're wasting the time of everyone in the company. It can't possibly be any more valuable than that to get that right. Fantastic. Yep. So if I wanted to train people in how to do this better, would I hire you? Would I bring in a consultant? Would I read a book? What helps me if once I figured out who needs the help and they are holding the meetings and it is costing us, how do I make them better?
I'm probably a little bit annoying here when I say I would look at the mirror and try to make my meetings first proper, and actually trying to figure out how to conduct a proper meeting. I think it starts from there. And yes, reading a book, obviously great. Hiring me, I might not be the right fit for that, nor I have time to consult as per se. I provide tools for you to understand your meeting culture. And indeed, when you're ready to take your steps to start to let it be reduce the meetings, start to enforce some of the rules, you actually create a meeting policy. You want to create the rules. I'm your right place then there, because I can remind.
You might help someone, a CEO or someone, to change the culture, but there might be other ways for them to improve as well. For example, for the CEO to improve his or her own meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And quite many times I see with my clients, yes, there is meetings become a topic. It's always kind of top 5 priority. It's never top 1 in the company. It's always within the top 5, and
therefore never gets done. It's like the weather, everybody complains about it, but no one ever does anything. Whereas unlike rain, you can do something about your meeting culture. Okay.
Yeah.
So your advice there is start with yourself, try to improve that, get the data from Petri, and then apply that to the people, apply those insights to the people who are holding the most meetings. Let me add something to that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Petri.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I am certain in any company, especially over 100 employees, you start to be, you will have expert meeting organizers there. Use their kind of skills to understand in your business context. You will get somebody from there to actually conduct it, and then it's within.
So look internally for people who are running good meetings, who maybe have studied it, who have even degrees in organizational leadership and things like that,
or just
use them as your experts, and exactly have lots of experience, have done it, have screwed up a lot of meetings. That's me for sure, and try to do them better. Okay, I like that very much. Let me try something on you, Petri, that people who come to a lot of squadron events will know well, and that is a concept called joint design. And I'll just tell a brief story, and I'm interested, Petri, in what you think. You're very welcome to disagree. That would be great if we disagree on it. But it's a concept I've used often. I wrote about it in Agile Conversations, my book, which I'll send for free to anybody who wants it. I'm not trying to sell you the book. But the concept is that what you want in a meeting, in order to make it more effective, more valuable for everyone, to keep people from being bored and checking out, as you said, is you want them involved. You want them participating in a real way. They're actually giving real data. And the problem is, of course, often the organizer may be really gung-ho, has a fantastic agenda, is ready to go through each one, agree to the new plan, and then go off and execute it. And somebody in the back knows that, hey, hang on a second, Singapore is not ready for us to roll this out. So if we're going to start in Asia, we're in big trouble. Guys, but that person never gets a chance to speak up. So you've got someone who's quiet in the back, or even trying to be vocal but can't be heard. And so the joint design method involves asking genuine questions of the group. Questions like, is there anything that could go wrong with this? How about, are we ready for this to go live to customers of a certain size? Or if we've tried it on small customers, are we ready for big customers? All those kinds of questions you ask, and you solicit opposing views. So you find people in the room that you think might think differently, and sometimes you even do a poll of them, and you check that they're ready for sharing a view if they have some other information. You're looking for data in the room, and then you have a decision maker who says, okay, now we're coming to the time, and this is often this strong meeting organizer, I suspect, Petri, who then says, okay, we're coming to the time we set, we've time boxed this meeting, the decision is X, or we're going to take this to the board, or whatever it is, and make sure that there's not endless discussion, so your meeting doesn't devolve. So those are the main elements of joint design. You want people genuinely participating, really making a change to the plan, the idea, what's happening, and you really want their opinion. That's the hardest part. And then you need some kind of time box in some way to stop it. I'm just wondering what your reaction is, Petri. Do you see meetings running well that way? Do you see a different method? What do you look at when you're looking for a good meeting?
I would take my answer a little bit outside of the scope of the meeting as per se. This is just genuinely how you interact with people. And there is a book, I believe the guy is called Richard D. Lewis, When Teams Collide, which was a big eye-opener for myself back in the day. And I know for an English-speaking kind of audience, it is hard to accept that in a meeting there would be quiet moments, because here in England, we tend to not like the quiet moments and fill it in with the chatter, which in many other cultures is actually kind of a sign, I'm done, now it's your turn. And when you start to look at it from that perspective, what I'm saying, I completely agree. You need to get the input from everyone from the room, and even more so, especially when you cross the different cultures, countries, the backgrounds, you need to give them an opportunity to be able to bring up the topics, even when their second language is the English, not so great, because there is distilled information that you just cannot have otherwise in the decision-making process.
There's a little trick I sometimes use to try to get the information out. And I want to come back to the cultural question, because I think that's super important. But the trick I use is to tell everybody, now, I've told someone in this room a secret word. And if during this meeting we can discover the secret word and say it out loud and say that's the secret word, there's ice cream outside. And so I'm going to give ice cream to everybody. And I pause a moment and let them all absorb that they're going to be trying to find out the secret word. And then I say, actually, I lied. There isn't a secret word and there's no ice cream. So I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. But you were all thinking just for a moment about how you would discover the secret word and how you might speak up in this meeting so that you could get the ice cream. What I want you to do in this meeting is pretend there's ice cream, because somebody in this room has secret information that should change our decision. We should think about this differently. And if we could get to that, if we could discover that secret word, information, data, then it would be really, really useful for us doing a better job. And it'll be a better reward than ice cream. So I usually get some dirty looks when I play that trick. But the nice thing is that it really, for a moment, does make you think, how am I going to discover this? How will I get information? Which is a totally different mindset than, I better absorb the information. I better agree with the plan. I better find out what the plan is so I can align with it. It's like, what could I discover? What could I ferret out? How could I find something that I don't know? And if people come in with that curious mindset, they often do a lot better.
Never heard that example being used in the meetings where I've been, but I guess the whole point is getting the people who are not ready to volunteer the information in a kind of ad hoc manner,
And my
giving
way is
everybody...
silly. I'm not suggesting everybody go out and promise ice cream. That maybe that doesn't work as well as other methods, but you want that curiosity, and that's what the joint design process is designed to create. It's meant to foster that. And if you use a different process, I'm completely happy. But the thing I don't want is a bunch of people sitting there saying, okay, I have ideas, but I better not say them. And you're right that can be a cultural influence. It can be the culture of the company. Never question the big boss. The big boss is telling us the plan. We need to just write it down and execute it. That's very damaging. And also it can be your culture around you, your country, the culture of your society, because many societies have a different point of view. Indian folks are well known for having a kind of yes culture, that the best thing to say is yes. That's not uniformly true. That's a stereotype, but there is a certain culture like that in the subcontinent. And I've been doing an awful lot of work in Africa where the default seems to be silence. So, I'll ask, what do you think? Does that make sense to you? What do you think? And people just are quiet. And I have to go around and actually poll them, which is another joint design technique, and say, okay, Petri, what do you think? Laura, what do you think? On to the next one. And then I get really great answers. So they don't have the yes culture that some folks do, but they have the be quiet culture and just not say anything. And I've seen this across Africa and many different clients. So there are lots of different cultural factors. And Petri, again, I wonder if you have any data. Do you pick up any patterns in what you observed? Does it differ by culture, by company, by location?
So this is my whole point, what I tried to make earlier, that I don't want to take that stance with my platform that, like this meeting is great because this happened, because it's so subjective. Think about the British example of coded speech. For a non-native speaker, a complete agreement might be complete disagreement. So it is...
Oh, yeah, Petri, that's a great idea. Yeah, sure. Yep, I definitely agree, Petri.
We need to revisit this later.
Yes, exactly. Let's discuss that in committee. Yes, we'll take that up next week in the board meeting. And what you actually mean is, oh my God, let's kill this thing before it gets too far.
Yeah,
and that can definitely be hard to read. I'm sure I would not do well with it in Finland.
Yeah, and when you start to take this kind of look in your international team, which we quite often actually work with, you give people space and time to elaborate on what they actually are thinking, share, first of all, and giving them the bandwidth and, a place to actually do it, and stopping everybody else. What I had in my previous jobs, I had quite often... some part of the team was somewhere like in Eastern Europe. I had here a London team. I had a tendency of sometimes conducting my team meetings actually from the offshore side, to kind of just give the Londoners the feel how hard it is to be on the wrong side of the meeting.
Absolutely.
It's these kind of teaching moments, and kind of like understanding that how being suddenly in a different kind of setting actually makes your meeting so much more harder.
Very nice. And I'll tell you an even more extreme example of that. Stack Overflow, which you might know as a developer, is a great place for getting information about any kind of coding question. In its heyday, now I think it got bought, and so I don't know if it still runs this way, but when it was really running hot, it had hundreds of people around the world all working remotely before the pandemic, so people weren't really used to this model. And every meeting they had was remote. In other words, if you and I were working in the New York office and we sat next to each other and we said, Petri, we should have a meeting about this. We should figure out how to build the new feature. We would each go into a room, a separate room, put on headphones, get on a screen, and talk to each other. Then we'd come out and shake hands and go to get some lunch together. And the reason they did that was to make sure it was absolutely a level playing field for everyone. And that required a lot of attention and cultural training to make people actually do it. But then there were recordings of the meetings. Everyone had to make sure they had really good video and audio. There's no chance that you weren't going to do that. And you avoided the kind of, the people in the other place, they're the secondary people. The people in Poland, we don't really listen to the Nigerians. Us in New York, we're the important people. So I wonder what you think about something extreme like that.
I have distilled actually my ideas a lot further than that.
Good. Tell us more.
So I have this kind of concept in my mind, which is kind of the bandwidth of the communication method.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the bandwidth, what you have when you're meeting face to face versus on a video call versus just an audio call versus text call, and the bandwidth increases in all the levels. I'm not saying that it always must be level playing field. Sometimes you actually need that drawing board and actually just facilitate quick brainstorming. You know, if the situation needs it. But yeah, quite frankly, I'm with you. Try to make it level playing field when needed, especially if it's a reoccurring meeting, your team meeting. Yes, absolutely makes sense. But keep in mind the bandwidth increases when you have the face-to-face interaction. So there is a merit for those as well.
There's a great graph, and I'm going to have a follow-up post after this, by the way, on the Squirrel Squadron forum. So feel free to check that out. If you're not sure about that, go to squirrelsquadron.com. You can find this. But what I'll post there is a great graph by a very clever person named Alistair Coburn, one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, somebody who's been thinking about this stuff for 30 years, and I've learned a lot from. And he has a very simple graph, and it has the shape you would expect. It has a nice curve that goes up in terms of bandwidth and type of communication. And the bandwidth for something like a Slack message or a text message is really low. It's down over here. And then way up here is having a meeting in person with 3 dimensions and gestures. And, I was meeting some people in person, which is something I don't do very often today. I was in London. And, I could touch someone on the shoulder and I could lean in and I could do a lot of things I can't do with you, Petri. But here with you, Petri, we're seeing each other. My gestures are coming across to you. You can tell I'm animated, whether you're disturbed. Exactly. You've done it perfectly. And that's much greater context and bandwidth than a Slack message, for example. So the more bandwidth you can get, the better. And the secret of the Stack Overflow method, and I'm not necessarily saying everyone here needs to do that particular extreme solution, but what they did is they said, we're going to intentionally decrease the bandwidth of some people in order that everybody has the same bandwidth so that they can all get good at interacting. We'll have high quality earphones and other things, which was very important at that time. Then, of course, we were all forced to do that in pandemic times. So we've had a kind of global experiment in that direction, which is really interesting. Olga says, Petri, did you find a correlation between the length of a meeting and its productivity? We talked about this before. Should we aim for shorter meetings? Now, you were saying that you weren't finding significant patterns in the data, but I'll just press you on Olga's behalf. Is there anything meaningful there? Do any of your clients say, look, we're going to make all meetings 30 minutes or even 15? And does that help them? Does it hurt them? Does it matter?
Okay. Two sides. First of all, one of the first recommendation, even before engaging with myself or us, is I say turn on the settings in either on the Microsoft Stack or Google Stack. Don't allow people to organize meetings by default for 1 hour. Adjust the time saving to 10 minutes. First of all, put that on and put the default to half an hour, or in this case, 25 minutes. Most of the meetings, 15-20 minutes is enough, because quite frankly, you haven't necessarily digested the information properly before you bring it to a meeting if you need hours and hours. And if it cannot be succeeded, the topic in 25 minutes, maybe you need to have a follow-up. Maybe you need to think about it more, what input you gathered there. Maybe you need to have indeed a meeting a little bit later and when you have research and thought about it further.
I like it. Something I do with my coaching clients, and it's made a huge difference. It was just a brainwave I had a year or two ago, was I switched from having a default meeting of 30 minutes, maybe once a week, twice a week, to a default time of 15 minutes. But then I'm willing to have more of them during the week. So I might be coaching you, Petri, and I'll say, great, Petri, what I want you to do is go and clear out these meetings from your calendar. And I want you to come back tomorrow and tell me how that worked out. That's your homework. And that we can agree pretty quickly. And you can say, oh my God, Squirrel, I think that might be tough, but I'll give it a go. And then tomorrow we can check out which things did you cancel, which ones didn't work for you, why did it work, what did Squirrel misunderstand, and we can correct in real time. So frequent and short meetings, I would say to Olga, is definitely what I find is more effective. People have the kind of anti-meeting philosophy. And this is what I'm really keen to hear what Petri thinks. I'm not a fan of things like meeting-free Fridays because it means I can't have a meeting every day that's very short, that's really high value. So I wonder, Petri, what do you think about people who set aside a time and just say, even unilaterally without asking anybody, nope, no meetings on Wednesday? Does that work? Does that not work? Is it neutral?
First thing I actually want to give maybe for Olga a minor warning there. If you shorten everything to 15 minutes, make sure that the counterparty does not leave the meeting feeling that they were not heard because you were in rush to get out.
That's a very good point. And I should say this as well. I book them for 15 minutes, but I leave more time in my calendar so that if we're into something very exciting and it is valuable to keep going, I can. But the default is that it's 15 in our calendars to remind us, hey, wait a minute, if we're done, we're done. We can stop. We can go do something and come back tomorrow. So really, really good point, Petri. Thank you for pointing that out. How about meeting-free Fridays?
Yeah, so meeting-free Friday, the purpose whenever I hear this is it meeting-free Friday? Is it meeting-free Wednesday afternoon or whatever it is?
Who knows? People do all kinds of crazy things.
So the whole point here, as far as I can deduct where it comes from, people are extremely tired of scheduling and they don't have uninterrupted blocks of work to actually do their real work. So that's what it tries to address.
Wait, Petri, I got to stop you there for just a second. Because if you have effective meetings, if they are really valuable and you're really getting something out of them, I call that real work. So when people say, I need time for my real work, I stop them and I say, if the meeting isn't real work, let's kill the meeting. But some meetings really are real work. They are really valuable. Tell me if you disagree with that.
Meetings are real work, but they rarely are the output of the work that you're actually trying to do. It's
an activity,
when you
not an outcome. Very good
orchestrate,
point.
when you align people, it's kind of like, it's still meta level. The real work is usually involves something more than working with a group of people to produce outcomes. So that's what I refer to a real work.
Yeah.
Let it be writing a document, getting your thoughts through, creating a new design, creating software. Obviously there is pair programming and so on, but exceptions to the rule.
Is there are lots of activities that people do that are kind of meeting-like. They might even be in their calendars, but they might not think of them as meetings. And one of them you and I know about is two people at one keyboard writing code. That seems nuts, but I find it really valuable. I don't know what your experience is, Petri, but folks who do that are in some sense meeting. There's certainly a lot of information sharing. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of activity, and it's really valuable because you get an outcome. There's even a new type of programming people have started to try. They call it mob programming, where you get like 7 people all looking at a projector. I've not tried that myself, but I've heard good things. And sales does the same thing. You know, salespeople will ride along and they'll have somebody come along to learn from a good salesperson. And their job is to sit there, participate in the meeting, but learn how the person sells. And customer service people will have listen-ins on phone calls and other things. There's lots of stuff people do that involves having more than one person interacting, but we don't generally call it a meeting. And those things are also super valuable. They're often more valuable than the meeting that sets them up.
Completely agreed, but comes to exactly my point. What is the definition of a meeting, right? Just 2 people, hey, let's get to a huddle on a Slack channel. People can join. Is it really a meeting if you're just clarifying or discussing about certain topic? When does it really come to a meeting? And I have a tendency of believing meeting is something that you actually need input to do decisions. However, there are types of meetings which are not decision-making meetings as well. But you know, quite often my own books, I consider decisions are what dictates that it's meeting or not.
Got it. Now, there's another topic I want to go to, but I also just want to solicit more comments. Olga's question was right on and really helpful. I'd love to hear more comments and questions from people who are watching. If you want to just hang out and observe, that's great. If you're watching this on the recording and you have a question, get in touch with me or Petri. We'll have our information at the end. But even better, come to the Squirrel Squadron forum and we'll have a good old discussion there. And everybody can learn. So I just want to make sure everyone knows. Comments and questions are welcome. Throw them in. We're coming toward the end of the time. So if you have one, better get it now or you're not going to get us, at least right here. And you can always come to us later. But Petri, one of the things I'm often doing with people is reclaiming time. You referred to it before that people want these blocks, and there's tons and tons of studies that show that if you get uninterrupted blocks, you get much more writing done, you get more coding done, you get more thinking done, you get more strategy done. So there's high value to a time when there are no meetings. And so, of course, one of the things I tell people to do is put in meetings, which in fact are, I'm going to meet with myself. I'm going to go away and take a walk and think. And that's my time that I block from having meetings. And the first thing that people tell me when I say go do that, I give them that homework, is they say, I've got no blocks. There's no space in here. My meetings start at 7 and they finish at 12 and, 12 in the night sometimes. And, I'm going on meetings all day, every day. And I say, well, that's not sustainable. We got to do something about that. So I wonder, do you find yourself helping people as I do to cancel meetings, to get out of meetings, to not go to ones that are less valuable, or do you have a different technique?
Kind of touches a little bit politically sensitive topic.
Ooh,
there are certain teams who complain there all the time in the meetings, but it's more like cry out, look how busy I am, how important I am. I'm in so much meetings, but I have too many meetings.
Yeah.
So this one particular client of mine, they were concerned about their middle management being in meetings a lot, and because there was a lot of feedback coming about it. But then eventually when we measured this one, but people were kind of saying, but they don't want to change after all. It's kind of, stop complaining then.
People kind of like to be uncomfortable sometimes, if they can, especially if they can show, look, I'm so busy, I'm so important, I have all these meetings. And when they're actually asked to do some real work, that's actually quite threatening. I definitely agree. However, I try to be the meeting police, as you do, and tell them, look, you have to buckle down here. You need to do strategic work. I'm often helping people who are becoming executives for the first time, and they don't understand that it is real work to go to lunch with the head of marketing and build a relationship and understand what's important to that person so you can collaborate later and your further meetings are more effective. They don't understand that it's real work to take a walk. I had to tell one client his homework was take a walk. He had to take a walk at 2 o'clock every day. We put it in his diary and he took a walk, and my God, he had wonderful ideas after that. But he had to understand that that was part of my judgment of him. That was part of my expectation of him. That and when he saw that, then he saw the value to himself, and then he saw how useful it could be. But it really seems not like work. Just like an effective meeting seems not like work. You say, oh man, I'm just in a meeting here. I could be doing real work. Well, the effective meeting is work. The effective strategy thinking in the woods when you take a walk is also work. Defining it can be just as challenging as defining a meeting.
And we all come with our own personal ways of actually coming up with the best ideas. For myself, it's usually at the morning. Sorry, I'm sharing way too much. It's my morning shower when I come up with the best ideas. I have already had quite often times I have had my coordination meetings, what the day is going to look like. And then I have that uninterrupted time to actually think about what I know is coming ahead of the day. And then starts the meeting barrage. And you kind of start squishing those meetings through. But, keep yourself the time to actually have the thinking work. That's what most of the executives are paid for, right?
And the crucial thing is it is work. And especially if you live in an environment, if you're swimming in water that consists of tons of meetings and you have these people around you who are saying how busy they are, if you don't have that model around, it can be hard to swim against the current and say, okay, great, I'm going to have some quiet time here in which I'm going to have good ideas, so we don't have to have half these meetings. And that can be extremely valuable. I certainly recommend that people do that. Dan Hendrickson says, for those smaller meetings, let's jump in a Slack huddle. Is there a minimum viable agenda that you would recommend, or things to be considered when making one? So when you're having a short one, you were really strong on the agenda point here, Petri. Can't disagree with you. What would it look like if you're kind of jumping into a meeting, if you're doing something quick and it's going to be high value? What would an agenda look like for that?
I can give you an example. This is quite many years ago already. There was no Slack huddles at that point. We used a video call platform called Room, and we had a rule within the teams, and I was instilling it obviously to everybody. If you saw people exchanging more than 4 to 5 messages, then what somebody who saw it needs to call, go and get a room already. And yes, it's supposed to be funny, but it means you're not going to solve this question anymore by a couple of quick instant messages. Go and just figure it out. What's the outcome? Stop wasting each other's time while you're waiting. It's like, do you hear me? Over.
Yeah. Get in the meeting. And the value of that often is that, for example, if you're using Teams channels, then you have something you can share with other people. You can you get a record of it. We're getting these co-pilots and meeting note takers and so on that can come in and give you summaries of what's in the meeting. I don't think we're going to have time to talk about that, but I've certainly seen those as an interesting development. The worst, by the way, is when I hold a meeting and the only people who come are the robots, all the people's note takers. The people don't come, just the robots. I think, am I supposed to talk to these robots? It's a little silly. But more seriously, when you're having these meetings, come back to Dan's question, you're having these short sessions, having them in some format that's a little more formal can help you actually share the information, make a recording of it, record the decision, something like that. So it creates a little more formality. Dan's question was about agendas. Would you make an agenda for something like that? Would you rely just on note-taking or something else? What would you do?
No, I would genuinely, there is one person usually having a question or having a problem, and they are just seeking their peers' input on it, solving the problem. I don't think there is an agenda as per se, unless it becomes to be, hey, let's all discuss here about the API, but I think it would be unfair to actually just pull everybody ad hoc basis out of their kind of productive focus time. Hey, let's have a discussion now about our API definition.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, very helpful question, Dan. I hope we've answered there. The minimum viable agenda for a tiny meeting, like an ad hoc one, like we were talking about, is none. But make sure that you make it a little more formal. Make sure you have some record of what happened. You have some result that comes out of it. You have some notes. You have maybe a channel or something like that where you're recording the discussion, because then you're treating it a little bit more like the expense it really is. And that's Petri's point, is he says, look, I can save your company lots of money by figuring out where your useful meetings are and getting more value out of those. Where can you concentrate, like you said before, concentrate your training, your expertise, your knowledge in the people who are costing you a lot by running meetings, and get rid of the ones that aren't useful. Find out which ones are costly and ineffective and kill them. That seems like a very, very useful thing to do.
This kind of Slack message and this mini huddle now got my mind at least completely going into Slack world and asynchronous communication side of things.
Yeah, don't get me started on Slack. I think it's harmed much more than it has helped. But that's another.
We might need a new session.
We might need that.
But yeah, in the mini huddle, ask your team members if there was a decision being made, which could be, let's invite a meeting to define the API, for example. Type it out there. Our decision was to actually bring this up in a team meeting later on, or whatever it is, so people are not left hanging. Okay, what was the outcome? They need to go and ask, hey, what was going on in that call? That could be my recommendation. But yeah, Slack is a interesting time sink itself.
I will just suggest one thing that's very useful to read, and it was written before Slack really got as popular. That's a book by Hal Newport, which I think it's called something like 4 Arguments Against Email. I can't remember. A World Without Email is, I think, the book. And he writes about how people use email this way. Of course, what's much worse is now we use Slack as kind of like a constant email all the time, and it just comes in and pings us, and we get drawn into 50 different channels. And I think that can be very harmful. And there, a well-organized meeting with a good trained organizer with a nice agenda could actually be much better than sending 50 different emails. That's exactly what happened to me yesterday, actually, is I'm coordinating some due diligence for a client of mine to check in on a company. And there were emails pinging back and forth about how we do it, and everybody was getting very confused and repeating things incorrectly and so on. I said, stop, everyone. Call is tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We're going to get on. We're going to sort this out. 10 minutes later, we had the whole process sorted out and worked out, which it would have taken 50, 75, 100 emails to do. So I know that's kind of meetings 101, but so easy to forget. So I think that's a very helpful reminder. Thank you, Petri. Petri, we're at the time that we were planning for. If somebody wants to sneak in a final question, please do. But what I want to do is let you talk about where people can find you, what more, if they'd like to try out your nifty tools and so on, or just talk to you. I know FlowTrace is a place to go. Is that the best one, or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to reach my business indeed. But yeah, I'm obviously can be found from LinkedIn, Petri Lehtonen with a flow trace, connecting there. Happy to chat over there. But yeah, like I'm all about meetings nowadays and meeting costs. It's exactly like kind of I did a kind of small example for this this call. Exactly like if you're running a 100-employee company, and of course you can deduct there from the different sizes, but just 15 hours a meeting per person per week, which is, by the way, a lot. And some of my clients actually do have those numbers when they come in with meeting fatigue. That's literally in pounds. That's 4.3 million pounds a year, how much you invest in meetings. Make sure you get the outcomes you want for that investment.
And the biggest takeaway for me here, which I'm going to quote you on now, Petri, relentlessly, is that there's a small group. It's obvious when you think about it. There's a small group that's costing you that 4.3 million. There's a large group attending, but there's a small group booking. And if those people could book less and more effectively and actually get value, it might still cost you millions of pounds, but it would give you millions more in value. That would certainly be a fantastic outcome. Okay. Well, Petri, it's been fantastic having you on. I just want to note to people that if they want to come to more of these events, they're every week. I'm thinking of shaking them up a little bit this summer. I might do them a little differently, but there's a list of current upcoming ones on squirrelsquadron.com. There'll be a follow-up with some of these ideas like the Alistair Coburn bandwidth chart and other things that we've talked about here. So I'm going to look up that when teams collide. That sounds fascinating. So I'll put all that stuff in a follow-up post on the forum. And that's a place to then go on discussing all these ideas and think about, what could we do differently? We had this wonderful post from China I was mentioning, which I'm going to respond to now, with all these ideas, because now you've given us ideas about how to run meetings better. And this person was describing what was good about their meetings. So I want to pull out some of those and link them up. So lots of discussion happening there. This is all free, by the way. I never charge for this. This is my way of giving back. So really grateful to Petri for joining us today. Thanks to Olga and Dan for great questions, and all of you for listening. And I look forward to seeing you at future events and in the squadron. Have a wonderful day.